Okay, whenever you're ready. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the special meeting of the Cape Coral City Council. Today is May 20th, 2022. This meeting now comes to order. If you would, could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I call the roll, I would like to announce that Councilmember Welsh has asked to be excused, and I will mark him so. Mayor Gunter?
Here.
Councilmembers Cosden? Here. Hayden?
Here.
Long?
Here.
Nelson?
Here.
Shepard?
Here.
Tate?
Here.
7 present, 1 excused.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, do we have any council members requesting to appear remotely?
Councilmember Nelson?
Okay, do we have a motion to allow Councilmember Nelson to appear remotely?
So move. Second.
Madam City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Tate?
Aye.
Cosden? Aye. Gunter?
Aye.
Hayden?
Aye.
Long?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Shepard?
Aye.
7 ayes, motion carried.
Okay, next item is the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda? The only change that I'd like to request, that was requested by staff, is to move the citizens' input time until between items 5 and 6. So that will be the last item on the agenda, citizens' input. That's the only change that I have. Is there any other changes? Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
And did I hear second?
Yes, second agrees.
Any discussion? Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Tate? Aye. Cosden? Aye. Gunter?
Aye.
Hayden?
Aye.
Long?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Shepard?
Aye.
7 ayes, motion carried.
Okay, item 5 is new business. 5A is the ULI Advisory Service Panel Stakeholders results. And before we get started there, I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and help the city of Cape Coral to be able to establish a strategic plan and a vision for the future. So I just wanted to say thank you for that before we get started. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, members of City Council. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You know, 2 years ago, we celebrated the Cape's 50th anniversary. And it also coincided with my arrival here in the Cape to be your city manager. And right around the time we were having the variety of festivities, I started having conversations with individuals in the community to get to know more about the Cape, but also to try to understand where we're headed in the next 50 years. And so that piqued my curiosity, piqued the curiosity of many people in the community, and we decided to move forward as part of your strategic planning effort to look at that long-term horizon, 50 years from now. How are we going to celebrate our success as a well-rounded community? And we started to think about what professionals are out there that can help us in that journey. And we didn't want to simply go out and hire a firm of urban planners, architects, and so forth, and only have a one-sided view on a potential solution to where we want to head to in the future. And so we know, and we have worked for in a variety of different engagements. We are very familiar with the Urban Land Institute based out of Washington, D.C. And so we reached out to the Urban Land Institute, otherwise known as ULI, and asked them if they would be interested in coming to Cape Coral and helping us craft that vision for our future. Now, COVID got in our way, Mr. Mayor, and here we are in basically June of 2022, but our intent was with ULI to have started this process sometime in late 2020, early 2021. But again, because of the various challenges we had with COVID, we were not able to schedule this activity until this year. So let me tell you a little bit about the Urban Land Institute, or ULI. The stated mission of ULI is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. It is committed to connecting active, passionate, diverse members through the foremost global network of interdisciplinary professionals. I am a member of the Urban Land Institute and have been for at least 10 to 12 years, and many of your staff members in the Development Services Department are also members of the Urban Land Institute. It also seeks to inspire best practices for equitable and sustainable land use through content, education, convening, mentoring, and knowledge sharing. It is a leader in solving community and real estate challenges through applied collective global experience and philanthropic engagement. Through its advisory services program, ULI offers expertise and technical assistance for communities and organizations facing land use challenges. For more than 70 years, ULI members have delivered changes in our cities through ULI's advisory services panel. Whether it be devastation of disaster, food access, and healthy design, or a shortage of housing choices, advisory services panels have offered unbiased and independent solutions to the most complex problems facing communities. Members come to a community and link up with local leaders to draft a plan to revive, rethink, and restore communities around the globe to ultimately enact change and improve the lives of people who live there. Panels bring together the best and brightest from ULI's diverse membership: developers, planners, financiers, market analysts, economists, architects, designers, and public officials to provide practical solutions and objective advice not available from other sources. We've been fortunate to work with this talented team of ULI panelists. They are volunteers, and they're joined by ULI staff members to help us solve specific questions that are posed to the panelists in advance of their arrival. And so now I'd like to turn it over, Mr. Mayor, to Lee Ferguson, who served as the panel chair for this particular engagement. Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you for that excellent introduction, and quite frankly, you've done a fair bit of the work that I anticipated that I was going to have to do in terms of introduction, so we're going to move right into our presentation. We really owe our special thanks to the mayor and you council members and to the city staff who have hosted us so ably this week. And it's been a great visit, and forgive me because I'm having to shift through my notes a little bit because Rob did a good bit of the work that are on my first couple of slides, but let's just move right ahead here. This, the introduction you've already seen, we're about 45,000 members around the world, and he's described to you many of the things that are on these slides. This will be left behind for your review later at your leisure. Again, the advisory service panel since 1947, and I think collectively amongst us there are probably close to 75 or 100 of these panels that have been done around the country by the folks that you see sitting in front of you this morning. I won't point anyone out, but the gentleman that was sitting to my right has done 37. This is his 38th, so he's a bit of the lion's share of our history. We want to thank you folks for hosting us so ably this week, specifically Mayor Gunter and Rob Hernandez and Nita Whaley, and all of the folks that have come out and visited with us and given us their input under the understanding that nothing would be attributed to any individual in our report, and so that anonymity, we hope, has given people the opportunity to tell us the good and the bad and the indifferent, so that we can really give you our best advice and counsel. We've spent several long days. We got an extensive briefing package. Back in the first time I did one of these things, I got a notebook. It was in 1992. Mary Beth was staffing that panel, and we got this notebook about this big in advance, and we got to read it. This time we got an email, and it had a link attached to it. And I think there were 147 documents by the time you weeded down through that. So we've had a wealth of information to review in advance, which was very helpful and put together by you folks locally. And then our staff has also put some other things together. We've spent several long days, and at this point, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to my text so that I don't. It's been said that I will talk forever if allowed to, so I'm trying to exercise some discipline on myself. We've spent several long days digesting this input, and in mostly collegial but sometimes heated discussion amongst us and deliberation. We will now share our collective vision of what we see as the incredible future potential of your city, providing our thoughtful recommendations of how you might best realize these wonderful opportunities. If you share our vision of the potential for the future of Cape Coral becoming a truly great city, that will happen in likely a very few years, probably much quicker than you might even be anticipating. But only if you organize yourselves to ensure that it becomes the place that you want it to be. And when we say that you want it to be, we're really looking at the whole community, everybody from top to bottom, east to west, north to south, everyone in your community, and including those who will come here in the future. The panelists serving on these panels, as Rob mentioned, are all professionals from various disciplines, selected specifically for each panel assignment by the Urban Land Institute based on their experience in similar land use and other real estate related issues. And we're ably supported by the professional staff. I'm going to go through and introduce each of those folks as they will present, and so they will. And the process of how this works is we will go from panelist to panelist right through the process, so that you will hear all the recommendations. Dan Conway, who comes to us from Denver, Colorado, is an urban economist that studies real estate markets and why they perform the way they do. He's been doing this for over 55 years, and as I said, has participated in 37 of these advisory service panels. Next will be Alan Folks, who's a principal in the firm of Ascent in Sacramento, California. He's an urban designer who has focused his career on leading design and planning teams to solve complex urban problems in the U.S. and Asia. Susanna Ross is a New England-based licensed landscape architect with 20 years of experience managing complex urban landscape design and construction. She enjoys exploring the potential of the public realm to enrich the daily life, health, well-being of city dwellers and urban ecology, and to shape the core identity of a city. Lindsay Bruger from Washington, D.C. is Vice President of ULI's Urban Resilience Program. As an architect and resilient design expert, she helps communities across the globe turn the negative impacts of climate change into opportunities where all can thrive. Donnie R James is the Chief Real Estate Officer for the Revenue Authority in Prince George's County, Maryland, where he is responsible for developing real estate policy, overseeing complex real estate transactions, and private-public partnership for all asset classes within the city, which will be a particular we hope will be of particular interest in some of the things that Donnie will have to bring to you. The ULI staff supporting this effort include Mary Beth Corrigan, who's ULI's Executive Vice President in Washington, D.C., overseeing the Advisory Services Program, as well as ULI's Leadership Program and Governance. She's been with ULI for 24 years, even though she's only 39, and she's managed over 50 of these such assignments. Mary Beth, I had to get that in, I'm sorry. Okay. David Zayer of Washington, D.C. works for the Urban Land Institute as a part of the Advisory Services Program, helping to plan, conduct, and evaluate advisory service panels nationally. Barbara Gustus is based out of the ULI headquarters office as well in Washington, D.C., and as the Director of Advisory Services and Key Leaders, she manages the services program panel logistics, maximizing our efficiency and ensuring that we collect with local communities we serve. And she's done a wonderful job of making sure that we had a chance to enjoy some of your great restaurants. The Lobster Lady, and this is not an advertisement for them, but we had a great time there the other night. I ordered a salad and told my wife that I just had a salad for dinner. The rest of the story is I had the lobster salad and I couldn't eat it all. It was so good. Anyway, don't get me off on that. I happen to be a foodie and I've had a great time here. Okay. At the end of our presentation, there will be a time for questions and answers, and the ULI staff will then return to DC and produce the final documents of these recommendations that will be returned to the city in about 2 months. There'll be some dialogue back and forth to be sure that we get it right and that we verify all the factual things that are in there about the history, the things that, in terms of what's going forward. For those of you that might be wondering, those will be ULI recommendations. They will be for you to review and consider. So the editing process is to be sure that the facts are right going in, and the recommendations will be ours for which we and the ULI will take responsibility for. At the end of this presentation, there will be a Q&A period, and we hope you find these recommendations useful in charting the future course for Cape Coral as the great city that we know it can and will become if you all get together and move forward. If you agree with our suggestions and move forward, we know that it'll be there. Dan will now share his view of the current conditions and future perspective of the market, followed by each of the other panelists presenting their portion of the work and recommendations, and I will return to handle Q&A and closing comments. Thank you. Dan.
Good morning, Mayor and members of City Council and the general public here. It's very nice to be here this morning. The panel's market analysis quantifies and identifies the development opportunities in Cape Coral and the potential for the city to capitalize on those opportunities and prepare an action plan with an economic foundation. Cape Coral is a very complex city. As reported by the U.S. Census, Cape Coral is the largest community in Lee County, the SMSA, which has 407,000 people employed, of which approximately 60,000 are in Cape Coral. Today, approximately 200,000 permanent residents and 71,000 households call Cape Coral home. This is 26% of the SMSA population. Since 1990, Cape Coral's permanent population has grown annually by more than 3,800 people in 1,300 households, and it is projected to grow annually by almost 4,300 people in 1,950 households during the next 10 years. In addition to these permanent residents, Cape Coral has a significant number of seasonal and second homes, including approximately 30,000 units, or 32% of the SMSA total. This seasonal and second home market is projected to grow by 500 units annually, and as a result, the total Cape Coral housing market is projected to grow by 2,520 units per year, including 1,450 detached single-family units, 440 townhome and condominium units, and 630 rental apartment units. Since 1980, Cape Coral has seen the construction of 2,000 units per year, but in 2020 and 2021, this has doubled annually to almost 4,000 units per year, with 23% of that total being multifamily units. In addition to the residential development, Cape Coral also has had and will continue to experience industrial, office, retail, and hotel development activity. Cape Coral's existing industrial base encompasses 2.6 million square feet, or 8.3% of Lee County's industrial space. Historically, Cape Coral's industrial market has grown annually by 28,000 square feet, and it is projected annually to grow by 40,000 square feet. Cape Coral has 2.6 million square feet of office space, which is 12% of the SMSA total. Historically, it has grown by 46,000 square feet per year, and it is projected to grow by 60,000 square feet annually. Of the Cape Coral's office market, almost 40% are medical-related office users, and annually the medical office market should grow by 23,000 square feet per year. Cape Coral's hotel market includes 830 hotel rooms, which is only 6% of the hotel room count in the Lee County SMSA, which has 13,200 hotel rooms. The Lee County SMSA is projected to grow its hotel market by 350 rooms per year, and we think 100 of those rooms could be here in Cape Coral. The final commercial real estate sector is the retail market. Today, Cape Coral has 8 million square feet of retail space, which is 16.5% of the SMSA total. Historically, Cape Coral's retail market has grown by 141,000 square feet, and we're projecting that over the next 10 years, it will grow annually by 171,000 square feet. Given these residential and commercial projected land use demands, Cape Coral should anticipate the absorption of approximately 500 acres of real estate annually. Understanding the dynamics of the socioeconomic forces projected to impact Cape Coral can help shape the vision for the future. The ULI panel has been asked to create Cape Coral's vision for the next 50 years, but growth is coming at a much faster rate than in the past, and the city needs to be prepared. According to information provided by the city, there are more than 44,400 vacant platted single-family lots in Cape Coral, and given the projected growth of almost 2,500 residential units per year, that could increase to 4,000 units per year. In theory, these undeveloped lots or unimproved lots could be absorbed in as few as 11 to 18 years. Also, with 4,300 new permanent residents each year, along with 1,500 new seasonal and second home residents, Cape Coral needs to adjust its vision for the future to prepare for those wanting to call Cape Coral home. Cape Coral needs to offer a continuum of housing opportunities, including attainable housing for all its residents. Cape Coral needs to provide improved medical care, including specialized health care in the community. The city needs to broaden the opportunities for post-secondary education, including technical, academic, and professional studies. It will need to develop a state-of-the-art industrial and business park of 50 to 75 acres to serve the expansion needs of the current businesses, as well as those that are attracted to the lifestyle here in Cape Coral. It will need to increase the supply of resort facilities and hotel rooms to attract a growing tourist market and to capitalize on the leisure and travel markets that will find Cape Coral very attractive. The city will need to enhance the city's cultural and art offerings so that residents of all ages and demographics can participate in the arts. Finally, the city needs to take into consideration the unique environment that is Cape Coral, embrace all that it has to offer. Given these comments and that socioeconomic background, Alan and Suzanne will now present their plans demonstrating the panel's recommendations. Thank you.
All right, good morning. Nice to see you all, and it's been a very pleasant week, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So Dan gave you a little bit of the market demand. Lee talked a little bit about this could be coming at you faster than you think. So we've all talked about here this in the last few weeks about trying to get prepared for that and figuring out how do we make this a complete city, one that's built up from its community and has strong community roots. So I'll talk a little bit about that planning context and why it needs to evolve, and then Susanna will come up and show you a little bit of the aspirational imagery of where we think you need to go, where you want to go maybe, okay? So we don't need to talk too much about the history of how this was platted. You all know that. It's very striking to us, though, that it was platted so much with residential land that there was nothing left for all those other community cultural facilities that other cities have in spades and you don't. That's the next step when you go from a teenager to an adult. You know, moving to the next phase now is making sure you have all of those amenities for the citizens you have here today. One of the positive outcomes, though, was, look, everybody got a house, a boat, a canal. What's not to like? It's very desirable. But it does have consequences, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So it's a very large city, much larger than a lot of the cities that we work in. And it makes it a little disorienting sometimes. You know, the first day I got here, I got out, rode on a bicycle, and I kept going down one-way streets and loop streets and you know, kind of got lost. So there's a lack of sort of connectivity and legibility and understanding of when you come in and out of a neighborhood, when you come in and out of a district. So there's a lack of connectivity, and there's 12 miles or so north to south, 9 or 10 miles east to west, over 120 square miles. The good news is you have room to grow, even though that contradicts a little what I just said. But in the north, in the northern quadrants, you have opportunities now to rethink connectivity, rethink open space, rethink cultural amenities, etc. So it is a city of quadrants and a city of somewhat separate identities. We interviewed a lot of people, and a lot of people said, well, I live in the Northeast, or I live in the Southwest, and I can tell you the physical place where I live, but I also have this mental image that I'll tell you that maybe that's the place where the foreign community lives, or that's the place where that's the younger populations live, or the older populations who started this community live, or the new people coming. So there's a mental image in everybody's map about sort of the quadrants. And that's maybe something you can actually build off from in some ways. But we do think that there's, you know, this kind of continued referencing of that is sort of born out of a yearning now to sort of see the city in a little bit of a finer grain. Start to drill down in a little bit more about what it means to live in a district, what it means to live in my neighborhood, and understand that legibility a little bit better. We visited the downtown. No, it's not central, and no, it's not your traditional downtown. We've all been to town squares in New England. We've all been to places that have the community square and the mixed-use buildings surround it, and there may be a church there may be a city hall there may be other things that everybody says that's the heart and soul of our community. Well, you were stuck with this kind of platted linear format, this linear parcelization. So we applaud you for starting to figure that out here. And we think that you probably can get there, but it ultimately will need sort of an infusion of the arts, the music. Make it more than just about entertainment, restaurants, and other things. So encouraging some of those proposals that want to have mixed-use buildings, want to have places in them that are civic-minded, civic-oriented, and make them happen. So you could have this downtown. And the other good thing is this becomes now an experiment for you to see how perhaps in other parts of the city you can sort of experiment with mixed-use buildings in more urban, walkable formats. So the goal is you don't leave the Fort Myers and go to their downtown, you stay in our downtown. We are kind of amazed that there's astonishingly little public access. You have boatloads of private access, but you have very little public access. The places that you do have, the Yacht Club, J.C. Park that we went and visited, I mean, these seem like they're just loved to death. They just seem like the community, because there's not that many choices, so everybody wants to go there. So even off-season, on a Monday, middle of the day, it's packed. Everybody wants to be there. So trying to find additional places in a waterfront city to get people to the public waterfront should be one of the highest goals that you have. And we do applaud again the changes you want to make at the Yacht Club, but we also want to make a note that that is based on memory too, because it's one of the few places that there are still some memories. So that has to be done carefully and sensitively as you redo the redevelopment there. Well, you have numerous parks. That's a really plus sign. Everybody that we talked to, all the people that said, you know, the park system here is actually pretty good. That's a picture from when I rode the bike down Pelican. I looked at the new softball complex you have there, the soccer complex. These seem, you know, there's people out using them, seem well loved. Rotary Park seems like it's a really cool little small environmental park. So you have some really good parks of that size. It was mentioned in some of the interviews that maybe there's not enough for the teens to do. So looking for teen centers is probably a good thing as you move forward. But there's no large regional park. We also are kind of amazed that, you know, a city of 200,000 people, there's no 100-acre park that is where everybody comes to celebrate together as a city. Almost all great cities have that. And sometimes it can be a lot more. So if what Dan said is right, and you're moving from 200,000 people closer to 400,000, start thinking about that regional park, where it wants to be. So there's also a bit of a culture void. Museums, performing arts, places that are artist collaborative. Leveraging the talent that is within your community to build artistic programs, artistic expressions, murals, all those things that happen in an evolving and dynamic urban environment. And you can do some of this as you start to think about the quadrants and where you might want to sort of anchor institutions. So you don't have to put all this stuff in the same place. In fact, I would say you shouldn't do that. So you can start to think about giving identity to the quadrants by placing some of the key amenities around the city. And then finally, one other thing that was mentioned here was about a kind of an indoor sports facility, something that maybe you don't have, but something you can think about that then leverages outside tournaments, brings visitors in. Of course, when they come, they spend money, and that's a good thing. Which then relates to what Dan said. You know, there is an insignificant tourist lodging infrastructure. Obviously, the long-term seasonal stuff that people come, you have that in spades, but you don't have the short-term stay. And that Westin hotel that we stayed in is fabulous. So is there another Westin out there somewhere? Something like that can be another flagship opportunity that you can partner with. There's also a predominance of one housing type. We all know what that is. It's the single-family detached house. As land becomes more scarce, you're going to have to start thinking about different ways to come up with different prototypes. So there's maybe a lot of new apartments coming in, but there's not some of the range of things that happen in between that scale of the single-family house and the 8-story apartments. There's nothing in the middle there that we see. So think about how do you broaden your housing base. The strip centers, and we did have dinner in one, as our chairman said, and it was fabulous. So they do predominate. Now, there's nothing wrong with having good retail in those centers, but the issue sometimes is they're not always walkable, and it's also that I drive to it, shop once, get back in my car, and leave. So if you have different kinds of larger mixed-use retail environments where I park my car and then shop 5 or 6 times to get the various things I need, then go back to my car, that maybe makes a little more sense. So start thinking about how you can get those kinds of experiences and minimize the auto-centric shopping experience. Healthcare and post-high school education, Dan mentioned this again, it's very critical that you start thinking about where's the next hospital. If you're going to double in size, clearly you need another full-service hospital and all the other related healthcare things that go along with that. And likewise, the same thing is true about post-secondary education. One small vocational school in this community is not enough. Your residents are going to demand it. They're going to want it. The young people are going to want to stay. You want them to stay. You want them to go to school here. Both trade schools and community college and maybe even a 4-year college. So put that on your horizon, and the panel thinks you should actively promote that. So we have an image of a city that's still incomplete. It's still trying to find its way, it's still trying to build out. So what actions and measures can enhance sort of community building, and how do you get there? And what underpins your comprehensive plan review as you start to do that now over the next cycle and the cycle after that. So we've come up with a kind of a list of, I don't know, let's call them 10 planning principles here. Just to sort of maybe as a piece, a blueprint for you to hold on to as a council, as future councils, and for the community. So one of the things, again, we want to start is make sure you understand that there's legibility and wayfinding in this community. Start at the district level. You have the quadrants, the north-south where Santa Barbara meets Pine Island, and then the 4 quadrants go out from there. That's a good orientation point, but then there can be a number of districts, as you can see those circles on that slide, that sort of are maybe a mile radius in diameter, that then you can start to place some of the civic and cultural amenities within those districts. Start to differentiate again, start to brand them a little bit. And you can be creative about how you do that. And sometimes it's opportunistic. So this isn't all about data. This isn't about data-driven. It's about you thinking and acting proactively to say we want to seed some of these neighborhoods and some of these areas with key community building functions. That then dribbles down a little bit to the neighborhood level. Within each of these districts, maybe there's 4 or 5 neighborhoods. I mean, from the west into here, we kept driving and driving. We were still inside the same quadrant. It's enormous. But community building happens at the neighborhood level. We talked to a lot of people the last few days that seem very eager to get involved, want to stay involved. Find those champions, leverage what they can bring to the table, and then begin to harness sort of the next generation of those folks. Connect with the community organizations, and if there isn't one in a certain place, help them form one. Public voice is now going to be more and more critical to you as you finish and build out your community. Create a neighborhood map. I think that would be very helpful. It would have been helpful for me coming, here for the first time. Legibility and wayfinding. And then build greater housing diversity, public open space, neighborhoods. So as you begin to fill out the northern quadrants, you now can get a little, you know what doesn't work, and now you can start to concentrate on what can work. Connectivity, mixed use, good open spaces, and all those things that we think are important. Walkability. Principle 3, create a regional park that is programmed to include citywide events. Well, I've talked about that. Susanna's going to talk about it. This could be in the north, maybe somewhere north of Pine Island Road. Maybe it's up, there's a city-owned property up in the northwest. Maybe it's on the old golf course down in the southeast. Yeah, we know there's some issues with soil remediation and some other things there, but how many sites do you have that are 100 acres or more? Probably not too many. So you got to start thinking about where that goes and how you seed it for community activities. And there's a lot of things that could happen in a place like that. You can have botanic gardens. Maybe you have different kind of sporting activities you didn't have before. Maybe there's large outdoor music events where the community comes to. There's any number of things that you can start to think about for how that can be programmed and where it can be. Principle number 4, identify and secure additional places for public access to the waterfront. Look, we know this is not going to be easy. The west side's mangroves. The south is mangroves. There's a lot of vegetation there. The other side is privatized, mostly privatized going up the river. But find, if you can, any little piece, anything that gets people to the waterfront for public access. It's extremely important. And Susanna will talk more about why that's important. Develop a pedestrian-first mentality to transportation planning. This is key as you go further. Why is this important? Because of all those roads that were platted that had single dead-end streets, all that traffic filters back out to the major collectors and the arterials that are running north, south, and east, west. And you all know, you drive on them every day. But they're not safe for the pedestrian and they're not safe for the cyclist. So use the pedestrian-first mentality when you re-examine the right-of-ways, when you re-examine the crosswalks, and you start thinking about how is it safe, how do I cross the street, how does that child get to the school? Those all become now very important for you as you go from a city of 200,000 to 400,000, the traffic increases the potential for more accidents and potential for people to not use the public highways because it's too dangerous. So yeah, there's a lot of improvements you can make, and Susanna will talk more about that in a minute. Create the infrastructure necessary for mode choice. So I just talked a little bit about walking, but also start to think about what's the infrastructure that allows for somebody to ride an electric bike, ride a scooter, ride sharing, pickup and drop-offs in some of your key public places. On-demand shuttles. Start thinking about mass transit. Yes, it may not be the full-on bus systems that other cities have, and that's okay. But offering choice for people going forward will be very important. Principle 7, add cultural amenities to reflect a more diverse population and attract visitors. So, The Performing Arts Center was mentioned to us by a lot of the people in the interviews. You know, that could be, as you redevelop this complex around here, a Performing Arts Center right near the City Hall would be a fabulous place to do that. Talked about the yacht club and the redevelopment of that. Teen centers. Why don't you, try and find a small site for a teen center location south of Pine Island Road and another location north of Pine Island Road. That's not much space. That's pretty small, but it goes a long way for the youth in this community to have a place to go to. And then some of the newer mixed-use developments like Seven Islands and some of the other ones, make sure that there's some aspect of community benefit embedded within those projects. And sometimes it's a small thing. Maybe it's a community room that the community can use. Or maybe it's allowing for art and art programs and artists in residence kind of things. But start thinking about all those things that other cities have that you've been to, you like, and you want to experience in these new developments. Principle number 8, review the development codes to incentivize creativity and mandate quality. You're in demand right now. As Dan just said, everybody's coming to you guys. So you hold the cards now. You hold the cards about how to legislate quality. So review your development codes. Make sure that there's enough in there that can be objectionable. You're telling people what the setbacks are, what the heights are, what the building form is, its character. The architects will respond. They know how to do that. But just drive quality now as you go forward. And at the same time, start thinking about how do you get different kind of prototypes here. You've all heard that term missing middle. It gets a little overused these days. But simply put, it's trying to get the right density between a single-family detached house and an apartment building. There's lots of different prototypes out there that are very attractive that fall in that space. And as land gets more and more scarce, you need to densify. So don't be afraid of density. It can be your friend if it's done right. Principle 9, celebrate the natural environment through restoration and education. So, look, it's a wonderful setting. You guys know that. That's why you all moved here. But I think there's a story to tell between the degradation that happened in 1957 into the 60s, some preservation, restoration. This is what we did. This is today, the climate that we're in, the environment that we're in. Take that story and run with it. Do exhibits. If you find small parts of the land you can do restoration, education, do that. Collaborate with the schools. Begin to tell that story now. This is where we were, this is where we are, this is our future in that space. And then finally, principle number 10, resilience policies and guidelines need to underpin all land use decisions. So when you redo your guiding documents, make sure that those are front and center, and Lindsay will tell you a lot more about that. So I will conclude, and now you're going to see some pretty pictures from somebody who knows how to do them.
Thank you, Alan. I hope it ends up being more than just pretty pictures, but they are pretty, we'll tell you that, and some of them are your community. So from those high-level planning principles that Alan discussed, we're going to get down to the site design level and talk about 4 sort of goals for the design within spaces that we think we can sort of use as our test about whether the public open space is achieving what we want, and then some recommendations about the open space types and qualities across the city and its neighborhoods. As you know, the public realm of Cape Coral, the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, the waterfronts can help shape the identity of the city. We see examples of that here. Throughout this presentation that I'm giving, you will see examples from your city where we think you are doing really well, and then we're going to show some aspirational sort of ideas of what's being done in other cities, not so that you can copy it, but so that we can look at the kind of qualities and ingredients of what might make a good design for Cape Coral. The panel suggests, as I said, 4 principles that we use to sort of gauge whether the landscape is doing, the open space is what we want it to be. After talking to all of you and probably everyone in this audience, we know that everyone's extremely proud of the city's unique history and identity, the canals, the laid-back lifestyle, the warm, friendly, and internationally diverse residents. The public spaces should celebrate the history, the beauty, the culture of Cape Coral. But we can do this in unexpected ways. For example, we might take cues in color, material, and spirit from iconic images like this. Second, and you've heard this, and you're going to hear more of it, I think it's something everyone can agree on, that our public realm should be safe, connected, and accessible. In a community that is so automobile dominated, it's critical to provide spaces for pedestrians, cyclists, and people of all abilities that are safe and well connected. Third, and here we're sharing some work that we're doing over in Sarasota, about an hour from here. As we all know, Florida is lovely. We love the warmth, the sun, but we also know that it has harsh conditions of extreme heat and humidity, tropical downpours. So anything we do in the public realm should be resilient both to the elements, to heavy public use, and always be aimed at human comfort. And then fourth, we know Cape Coral was conceived as a place for retirees, but we also know from talking to all of you that we're far from that single demographic now, that we've got young professionals, young families, youth. And so one thing we'd like to see is in our public realm, the kind of appeal to multiple generations. So for example, here you see our project in Moore Square. And while you may not see grandparents and parents jumping in the fountain, you do see them sitting close by, having conversation, watching the kids. And so we think spaces can be creatively considered with the adjacencies of different program types so that they're really magnets for everybody, for all generations. And that's something we're going to consider as we evaluate designs for each public space. So why are we talking about enriching the public realm? Well, there are a number of reasons, but outdoor lifestyle, as we know, is what draws people to Cape Coral. Between the canals, the natural shorelines, the wildlife, and the mangroves, all of that is enjoyed primarily from personal properties at the moment, from private properties. We think the city can do more. A great city provides spaces that foster a sense of community. And actually, we know that you're all very proud of that element of community, that you consider yourselves a close-knit community, and we think that your open spaces should reflect and foster that. We also know, with the passage of the GO bond in 2018, that your residents are signaling that they support investment in that sort of space. We urge you, the panel urges you to move forward with all of the projects that are being considered from those funds. And we believe that doing so will achieve an even richer system of parks and recreation across Cape Coral than what you already have. And as noted, we felt a hunger from all of you for places to gather as a community. As Alan mentioned, public waterfront access is lacking from what we see in other Florida cities and towns. We do know that there are some great sort of plans underway, from the renovation of the yacht club to the Tropicana Park, and we think these are great. But we think that you can be a little bit more sort of complex in thinking about how these public waterfront spaces work. And so here we're going to share a proposal that we put together for the Jacksonville Landing Design Competition, and just walk through some elements that you can see from this bird's eye perspective here. There's sort of elements we would love to see Cape Coral aim for in its parks. First of all, gathering spaces of various sizes. Again, plentiful shade, some paved, some soft. You'll see multiple means of continuous waterfront circulation. Currently, this joy of meandering along the water's edge is really something you only get from a boat. And we think that this could be an amazing thing to weave into public space where you're able. And as new and renovated seawalls, I should say, are installed, consider how to layer in continuous pedestrian access along them, achieving both flood protection and circulation. You see here also the integration of boat docks at the community core, kind of interwoven with park spaces and with pedestrian circulation in a way that makes everybody sort of benefit from the other. At the ground level, this plan for Jacksonville celebrates sunsets, and we think, again, we can imagine a site in Cape Coral that imagines the community together celebrating views to the river, to the Gulf, to Fort Myers, to the sunset, and to the boating life of the city. This would be beautiful on any day, but also as a backdrop for small concerts and holiday celebrations. You can also imagine in this scene that this couple has been dropped off by a water taxi. We know that that's surging in popularity here. We think quick water connections and the relief of pressure on the roads warrant the city considering expansion and encouragement of expansion of this system. It also broadens the experience of moving around the Cape over water, from people who own boats to those who don't. Alan mentioned the pressure on your one little beach, which people love, and we understand that adding more beaches is not necessarily feasible given the shoreline, but we wanted to point out that you can build beaches. They're doing it in Canada, and so even where your shoreline doesn't allow you to do it, you can consider creating spaces like this near the shore, and we believe there'll be magnets that they'll relieve pressure on that one beach at the yacht club. And really provide people that quintessential Florida experience that they crave. Next, we're going to talk about community identity and placemaking. We see some recent successes. The panel considers these to be successes in the city of Cape Coral, from the utility boxes to the streetscape project to the Adopt a Median program. Our understanding is all of them faced skepticism and resistance at first, but they have been embraced. And all of them are doing something to create a palette of materials, furnishings, and signage that signal the different zones of the city and convey an identity. We see a pent-up desire for creative expression by the community's artists, and an interest in giving color and character to otherwise utilitarian pieces of infrastructure. We think the city should build on this momentum and consider an expanded public art program and more opportunities for demonstration of community pride. Like this piece that we designed for Jacksonville Landing, placemaking elements should have impact from the moment you cross the bridge into Cape Coral, with a bold statement that serves as a gateway and announcement that you've arrived in the Cape. Gateway pieces of art or light might also be used to delineate areas where you're crossing from one quadrant or neighborhood to another. And as we show here, art can be gateway, play, and gathering spot all in once. While the city tackled the median, utility box, and paving projects piecemeal, it should consider a design approach that looks thoughtfully across the full range of materials and furnishings in the public realm, like we did here for the Sarasota Bay Park. Again, this is not something for you to mimic, but to sort of start to think about what is the essence of Cape Coral and how does that start to play out across the full public realm. Connectivity, I won't belabor this, but I think it's probably not lost on anyone that you can do better for cyclists and pedestrians. We think that the goals and strategies laid out in the 2017 master plan are smart and worth pursuing, high priorities to fill in gaps in the network. And we wholeheartedly support the vision of that plan that Cape can be a place that's comfortable, where walking and cycling are comfortable and integral parts of daily life for people of all ages and abilities. And when you sort of look at that network, the detailed site design should consider how planting, paving, and furnishings reinforce the comfort and safety of the connections, as these projects in San Diego and Boston do. Alan mentioned environmental education. With the mangroves, the wildlife, the endangered species, Cape Coral is a perfect setting. Also, you do have these great stories to tell about improving water quality, about this amazing world-class reclaimed water processing system. It's not sexy, but it's an important story to tell citizens and visitors. Walking trails we see at the 4 Mile Cove Ecological Preserve and the planned outdoor classroom at Yellow Fever Creek Preserve are great ideas, and we think you can enhance the experience environmental education. Look at design that allows people to meaningfully experience the peace, beauty, and ecological benefit of the environment. That means education not only through traditional signage, but through subtle but beautiful interpretive graphics that heighten the experience of the environment and generate an understanding of how the natural and human-made landscapes serve to protect Cape Coral. And some examples here again from Sarasota. Another example, a little bit more playful from our work in Ithaca Commons. But again, it's not about a sign, it's about engaging youth in a way that gets them interested in what they're seeing. Next, events and gathering. We know that there's a sort of a hunger for these big events, and that currently events like Red, White, and Boom and the Taste of the Cape are held in spaces that are either kind of lacking in infrastructure or in settings owned by private entities. We think it's important that there be an anchor. We heard that from a lot of you, sort of a physical community core, and the park can do that and be welcoming to all. You see here an example of our work from Council Bluffs, Iowa, on the shores of the Missouri River. And I think it's important that with these event spaces, you consider that they don't have a lot of, they have infrastructure and connections, but that they benefit from flexibility, that is, open, changeable spaces as opposed to fixed stages and seating. And that an entity dedicated to programming those spaces with art, performances, and food will be important. Lastly, Alan mentioned the idea of indoor recreation. We did hear this repeatedly, not just from sort of parents. It's clear that Cape Coral folks love their sports and being outside, and we see great examples of that, those offerings today. But what we feel like is missing is an indoor space. Again, the climate of Florida is lovely and wonderful, and it's why everyone comes here, but at certain times of day and year, being outside is unsafe or simply uncomfortable. And we think that there are spaces that could provide offerings for both fitness and recreation at all ages, and potentially double as places for practicing art and celebrating performance and visual arts. And again, for gathering of the youth groups that Alan has mentioned a few times. So that's where we think the Cape can be doing a little bit better. And with that, I think Lindsay's going to come talk about how you can do all of that in a resilient way. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Lindsay Bruger, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that 10th principle that Alan shared, that resilience policies and guidelines need to underpin all land use decisions. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that might look and how your growing, thriving, resilient city can be implemented. We've loved being in Cape Coral today. It's really a beautiful city. With your ample waterways, warm breezes, abundant sunshine, it's easy to see why folks will be coming here, are coming here. It's easy to see why you love living here. But these are also the unique environmental elements that make the city vulnerable. In our conversations, we heard concerns from residents: standing water after heavy rainstorms, rising flood insurance costs, limited irrigation opportunities in the dry season, not to mention dangerous high heat days, toxic algae blooms, and increased hurricane intensity. Cape Coral must take action, not just to protect the well-being of your residents and your property, but to safeguard the economic future of the city. Rating companies like Moody's are already including climate change in their sovereign ratings. Investors like Heitman are integrating climate risk assessment into their business decisions, and government is already proposing new regulations that would require the disclosure of climate risk. By becoming a resilient city, Cape Coral can signal to rating agencies, investors, and leaders across the globe that this is a city that will thrive for years to come. And resilience doesn't have to be a sacrifice. In fact, it can be an economic opportunity. ULI recently conducted this study, The Business Case for Resilience in Southeast Florida. Now, we know that Cape Coral is markedly different than cities on the East Coast. However, this study does suggest findings that could discuss what could unfold for you. What could this economic opportunity look like? Well, for every $1 invested in community-wide adaptations in Southeast Florida, they'll see about $2 in economic benefits. That translates to almost $38 billion. And that benefit is even higher for building-level adaptations. In another study that looked at Southwest Florida, we see that elevating homes well above the base flood elevation to mitigate hurricane storm surge can save up to $8.40 in recovery for every $1 invested in mitigation. Even more so, mitigating hurricane wind risk by building to the Fortified Home Program can save as much as $16 in recovery for every $1 invested in mitigation. So what does resilience look like? How do we achieve these benefits? Well, they really do align with the design and planning principles that Alan already laid out. I'll give you one example from my hometown, Washington, D.C. The Wharf is a waterfront development on the Washington Channel that provides great public access to the waterfront. It offers event and gathering spaces and has many opportunities for placemaking. It also mitigates its flood risk. The buildings are elevated about 1.5 feet above FEMA requirements, and the property line is set back to reduce the risk of flooding. That setback is key. It provides many opportunities for placemaking, as well as public space that can capture rainwater. You see here in the photo, many enjoying restaurants and great examples of public activity like what Susanna showed earlier. I'll admit that that wharf development is a bit larger than what you might see in Cape Coral, but it does suggest the positive benefits of aligning resilience and the design and urban planning principles that were discussed earlier. Here's an example that might be a little more at your scale, and there's many opportunities to implement something like this. As we look to the Go Bond, as we reflect on the beautiful network of Cape Coral's parks and open spaces and the desire for recreation, there's opportunity to achieve multiple goals. Cloudburst infrastructure, for example, this sunken basketball court. It accommodates heavy rainfall, it recharges groundwater, and it provides recreation amenities during sunny days, a valuable community space. As the awareness of climate consequences increase, so do opportunities for funding. The federal government has numerous grant programs to support hazard mitigation and resilience. At the state level, here in Florida, we see the Resilient Florida program. This program will spend $1 billion over 4 years for community resilience projects and planning efforts. The panel applauds the city in its successful grant award to conduct a vulnerability assessment. And the panel recommends applying for additional Resilient Florida funds when the assessment is complete, ideally prioritizing projects that can achieve multiple objectives. During our conversations, we heard many concerns regarding the sharp increase in insurance premiums. And we note that this is a particular challenge for the development and sustainability of workforce and attainable housing. To minimize this cost burden, the panel recommends that Cape Coral continue to participate in FEMA's community rating system and prioritize actions such as the development of a watershed management plan to increase Cape Coral's class from a 5 to a 4. The city has already taken great strides towards achieving this goal, and when they reach it, residents will be eligible for a 30% insurance discount. One interviewee shared that there was a concern about a $2,600 insurance policy. With a Class 4 discount, that individual could save $780. To further address the availability and cost of insurance, the panel recommends collaborating with regional partners to lobby for insurance incentives or discounts for properties that meet above code standards, like those that are cataloged in the Fortified program. This program is embraced by states like Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, North and South Carolina as a means to promote resilient design and reduce insurance costs. Above code design can not only reduce insurance premiums, but can also reduce recovery costs, increase business continuity, and protects taxpayer dollars. The panel recommends developing a set of resilient design guidelines that can reduce flood risk, address water scarcity that occurs in the dry season, and reduce the urban heat island effect. Furthermore, to safeguard city investments, it's recommended that any development that utilizes public funds are required to utilize these resilient design guidelines, as was done in the city of Boston. These resilient design guidelines will be critical to increasing the resilience of new development, but we also know that the Cape has a lot of existing buildings, and these need to be addressed too. The panel recommends a public education campaign that can encourage residents to utilize retrofit programs like Florida's Hurricane Loss Mitigation Retrofit Program and Florida's Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. Last is perhaps our most critical recommendation for creating a resilient city: enhancing city staff capacity. The panel recommends establishing a position dedicated to the creation and execution of Cape Coral's resilience plan. This individual would oversee the vulnerability assessment that's planned, as well as implement subsequent resilience actions, things like spearheading grant applications, leading the development of those resilient design guidelines, and also being able to coordinate across city departments, collaborate with community stakeholders, and engage regional partners. For nearly a decade, Chief Resilience Officer type roles have been established across the globe. Here in Florida, the role already exists at every level of government: the state, the county, and the city level. There's no city too large or too small to benefit from this type of role. Yes, even places like Palm Beach have city staff dedicated to optimizing the city's resilience. Steps like these can position Cape Coral as a growing, thriving, resilient city. And to further expand on recommended steps to implement this vision for Cape Coral, I'll pass the mic to Donnie.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Thank you guys for having us here. It's been a wonderful time this week. So we're going to talk about the vision and implementation. As they always say, a plan without execution is only hallucination. So it's our intent to get you there. The vision for the city of Cape Coral is communicating with the citizens, neighborhood and city identity, housing continuum, healthcare, industrial park development, resort development, higher education, and improvement to the water. Implementation, the steps are hiring an effective communication director, communicating with the citizen through social media, newsletter, and neighborhood outreach. Establishing a board of advisors to assist and support and champion development programs through the city. To overcome the headwind that the city of Cape Coral will face, the panel is recommending a board that will consist of individuals from the medical industry, the business industry, the homeless community, labor community, nonprofit community, and the banking community, in addition to expanding the bandwidth and capacity of the municipal staff. The planning principles that have been shared this morning, the creation of a regional park, neighborhoods, creating a self of identity. On the screen, there are examples of Chinatown in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., creating a pedestrian neighborhood for all citizens. To the left on the screen is National Park Service is creating a pedestrian and bike lane. And you want to make an environment that's encourage everyone to walk. Creating an arts district. This is an arts district in Hyattsville, Maryland that I've worked on, and it encompasses the young and the young at heart. This arts district also have a pop-up art gallery for those that are starting in art, and is open to the public for citizens of the community to come in and purchase or observe. Secondly, we contemplated the start of a revenue agency. This agency would consist of an odd number of board members, 11, 15, 17, or 21. The mayor would select members, may select members. The city council will select members. Municipal staff to be included on the board should include the budget director, the finance director, the office of law, the head of economic development for the city. And the board must, and I repeat, must have individuals from the business community, the philanthropical community, the pastoral community, and the banking community. To have this organization start, it would need some startup capital from the city, and this organization would move to a point of 100% self-sustainability. They could manage the city-owned parking lots and garages. As we have stated, Cape Coral is moving from a city to a large city. So there would be a point where you would need to parking meters, parking violators, and garages. And this agency could manage that parking, generate those revenues to support themselves. This agency would also must have the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. Once they're able to issue tax-exempt bonds, they can identify developers throughout the community to work or start projects in areas that have been less desired. This is an example of a project I'm working on, and we utilize the same methods that I just shared. The screen's a little dark, but in the far back, there are houses for sale. Those were homes for sale. To the far front, to the upper right-hand corner, is workforce housing for first responders. First responders are considered teachers, cops, firemen, and other first responders, so they can qualify to live in that area. To the far left of the building, to the far right, that's a mixed use. That would be hotel, retail on the bottom floor. To the back of that building, is another mixed-use building with 90,000 square foot of retail and 340 units of multifamily on top, and all of that is market rate. So that's one of the projects. And to the left, this project has gone from vision to reality. The homes that were for sale are completely sold out, and there's also a senior building. I apologize. There's also a senior building in that drop as well, and there are individuals that are 62 and above, and that is already full. We have green space for community to meet, have projects, and celebrate. This is another mixed-use project. This includes an hospital. So down in the right-hand corner is a level 1 hospital with the University of Maryland. This hospital opened last July, and we're in the process now of doing the rest of the build-out. And this will be a huge entertainment community with an amphitheater, retail, movie theater, and of course, housing. The other toolbox that currently exists In your toolbox are tax increment finance, tax abatement, and utility waivers to encourage and increase development opportunities in your neighborhoods. The other agency we want to recommend is a land swap or an exchange agency. As has been pointed out, there are 44,000 vacant lots throughout the city. This would be an agency that's overseen by a board of management that consists of civic and municipal leaders. This agency could start with a small staff, an executive director, a real estate agent, real estate sales attorney, and real estate processor. They too would need startup capitalization from the city. They can address the issues of purchase lots that are vacant from sellers. They can also inherit lots through a trust or a will if someone no longer wishes to own a lot in the city. This group can also be an intermediary to putting buyers and sellers together. Phasing. What do you do Monday morning at 8 a.m. or 8:30? Identify and work with neighborhood communities to create a sense of identity. It's very important. The city planning department began to study the process for creating a regional park and instituting a pedestrian-friendly environment. Also, we encourage you all to identify members that can serve on the board of the Revenue Authority as well as the Land Swap Agency. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lee.
Donnie, thank you very much for that implementation phase. And by the way, I want to tell you that we typically start these things with what do you do Monday morning to activate the vision and to accomplish these things. These are all, of course, subject to your sharing the vision that we have for how Cape Coral can become the great city that we think it can be. And if you agree with these concepts and visions and recommendations, our suggestion is you don't wait to think about it, you figure out how to actually get started. I want to go back to the notes again. The growth, a couple of the things that I think are given, growth will happen. People are coming, people already own a lot of this property, and something will be happening. How you set up for your future is up to you. It's your decision, it's your community. Hopefully we've provided you with some framework to think about how to accomplish those things. Again, if you shift it a little bit one way or the other, that's your prerogative and it can still work. The market is here. It doesn't need to be created, which is a feature that you have that many, many communities in this country do not have. There are cities that are shrinking for a variety of reasons. You're not in that position. The growth is coming. You are the ones that can determine what this place will be 50 years from now. As the mayor pointed out the other night, and by the way, in the process of this coming together during COVID and the other things that have caused it to be delayed somewhat from its original plan, I will share with you the first time I saw, we typically in these panels have a list of 3 or 4 questions that we're supposed to answer. The first time I saw a write-up, there were 5 questions. The next time it was 9, and then it was 15, and I see this morning there's now a more consolidated list. But the bottom line is all of those questions need to be addressed and answered over time. We hope that we've provided you with some guidance from what we've done. And another thing, the resiliency issue is one that for some of us that have as much gray hair as I do, I'm still trying to understand what resilience means. And Lindsay has provided a good outline of what the value of that is, even down to the point of the individual homeowner and how they can save money on their flood insurance by participating in this process. So this is soup to nuts, bottom to top, and it impacts everybody across the community. And the last thing that I would like to leave you with before we take questions and answer is that everyone should be engaged. This is truly, the future of this community can be determined by its leadership and by all of the people involved. And if all of the people in the community are engaged in the process, or at least have the opportunity to be engaged, And if that communication thing that Donnie was talking about is a two-way street, it's not a one-way street. You don't just put it in the newspaper or send it out and tell somebody. You then listen to the feedback. And I may be beginning to sound a little bit like a Southern Baptist preacher, but I'm actually Presbyterian so I apologize if I seem to be ranting and raving a little bit. But we're excited about the future that you have in front of you. We hope that we've provided you with some recommendations that you consider appropriate, and we're prepared to take any questions. Mr. Mayor, I will, if protocol is appropriate, we'll be more than happy to take questions from the audience, but I would first like to offer the opportunity for you, Mr. Mayor, and the city councilors, any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, and I want to thank each of you of the excellent presentation and what the vision of our city could be. I think as the city council, a staff, some of these things are eye-opening, and some of these things we've talked about already. So I think our plan moving forward is to make sure that we put the framework and the foundation in to try to achieve some of these goals that you've outlined. So for me, I'm looking forward to the final draft of your report in the next 2 months, where as a council, we can work on the framework to move some of these items that you've outlined forward. And I think in doing that, I almost think that we need to have, scheduled meetings to really address some of these items that you've outlined. I'll go into some of those further, but what I would like to do is I'll open it up for City Council for any comments, questions. And then once we get through that, I will open up the public hearing. So any members of the public who wish to come to the stand, make any recommendations, or maybe even have any questions during the public input part of our meeting, we'll give them the opportunity as well at that time. So with that being said, Councilmember Hayden, you're first up.
Thanks, and thanks for your comprehensive report. I really appreciate it, and I think you validated a lot of things that this council's been talking about for at least since I've been on it the last 18 months, including I really believe this council is charged with planning the city's future. I think we have the group up here and the teamwork exists to make that happen. And I think this just reiterates where we would like to go with our city. And just to clarify one thing that was said, I believe we have a good communications director in place. So I didn't want the public to think that we all of a sudden had an opening for a communications director, which we don't. So moving forward, I think as a council we've talked about resiliency efforts, how we protect our environment, how we conserve water. So I was really happy to see that you made that an important part of your presentation, because I don't think we can plan anything without addressing what climate change and global warming are going to mean to our community moving forward. So I think that's one area I've identified that we certainly need to move forward on, as well as pedestrian opportunities. I know there's several of us on council here that are looking at ways to improve our sidewalk and biking system. If you notice the bike report, it showed that we had a deficiency in sidewalks. I think at the time it was only 8% of our major and local roads had sidewalks. That's a deficiency for a community that's 92% residential at this point. So I was glad to see that mentioned, because I honestly believe beyond the $2.5 million that we may put in the budget each over the next 2 years, we need to increase that amount to at least keep that momentum going for getting sidewalks within 1 or 2 miles of schools, plus what we might do in the downtown area. Because as you come in here, it's not like you might see in Boston or DC. We don't have the traditional downtown. We have a major thoroughfare that goes through our downtown area, which limits pedestrian movement. It's great over on 47 Terrace with the entertainment area, but not so much on the main artery there. I was glad to see you identified the need for teen or community centers. Our youth council, when we had our joint meeting, pointed out that they wanted a gathering place, that they wanted us to know that we're not living on our phones or on social media, that they want face-to-face conversations. And I think the pandemic brought that out, that need to come back together again. So those gathering places, identifying the old golf course as a possibility for that, and some of the pictures you showed from other areas where it could develop into an arts area or a teen or community center or an environmental area will be important for us to look at in the future. Identifying waterfront opportunities, it's always a battle for us, as I mentioned during my interview, where you won't find too many communities that have a land mass of 120 square miles that really can't develop the western border of their city. It's a setback, but it's what we have to deal with, so we have to identify other areas. J.C. Park, this group has talked about, is that a possible area? You've seen some other projects that could increase that waterfront development as well. I don't know, the idea of these other funded agencies, that will take some discussion, and giving them the right to issue bonds. That's a little scary to me, but I think it's all great food for thought. It all helps us establish a roadmap that can connect with our strategic plan, which we're in the final stages of getting ready to approve that now. So I think combining the two will be great. I think the mayor's right. We're going to have to, if we want to accomplish what we want to do, set our future, set our vision, set our plans for that roadmap. It really needs to happen while we're up here in the next couple of years. So I appreciate it again, and thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Tate?
I wanted to thank you all. It was very enlightening. Feels like it's a big pie and we have to slice it one piece at a time. So to the mayor's point of having different meetings, I think it would be helpful, and not that I'm a big proponent of many meetings, but I think it would be helpful for us to put this in some sort of an orderly form, and not a committee of the whole meeting, but a meeting where we can just actually sit and talk and take one piece at a time and digest it and see how we're going to do it, especially because we have our budget workshops coming up. And Alan, this was probably the most eye-opening thing for me, because Mercedes will remember when we were doing the Burnt Store Road, council members each got a map, and we got to draw what we thought we wanted to see in those quadrants. And it was interesting that the corner that's now Publix was actually a waterfront access for all the freshwater canals in the Northeast. We got to draw it and vision it, and we don't do that here. And so I think we're always sunshine, and we're always out in the public, and we really need to just take our pens and pencils and crayons and figure it out. And so I would encourage us to do that. On the resiliency, I'm so glad that our chairman here doesn't understand resiliency, because it's a hard word to really get. And flood insurance is something that is a passion of mine that I've been working on tremendously. And the community rating system is something that Wyatt Deltry is working on with us. And I think the problem there is, and it's not a problem that we can't overcome, but it is cost to the building industry. And you all mentioned that it's going to cost us different funds to get this accomplished, but in the long run, the financial burden might become the benefit rather than the other way around. So we are working on the resiliency, not just sidewalks and water quality and everything else, but having our homeowners be able to live here and be affordable is something that we're facing right now that we have to hit head on. So I really appreciate that. I would encourage us to do exactly that. I made a whole list of notes, so I won't go through those. But thank you very much for your time and for engaging with us.
Thank you. I guess I'll jump in here at this point. I took a lot of notes, and I look forward to going through the report once it's issued. A couple things that stood out for me. The first thing is the quote, "A plan without an execution is only a hallucination. I think that's a very telling statement. You know, we can sit here and talk about many different things, but if we don't have an action plan to move forward, I guarantee you none of the things that they mentioned or any of their recommendations will never get there. And there's going to be some hard work along the way in order to make that happen. For me personally, I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and work hard to try to make this a reality. One of the other things that stood out for me personally was the statement with underpin all of your land use decisions on the plan or the vision that you develop. You know, we do that. We see a lot of land use changes come before us. And a lot of times you see commercial zoning, you see professional zoning going from that particular designation to residential. And I think, as we all have seen in the numbers, residentially, that's not our problem. That's taking care of itself just fine. So I think that we have to really keep that in mind moving forward when we have these land use hearings that come before us. One of the other telling statements that stood out to me was if you look at the growth of our city, what we are experiencing now, that we could be at build out in 11 to 18 years. You know, we always sit here and we talk about the next 50 years, but if we continue on this path of growth, I guarantee you that time frame of 50 years will definitely be cut in half. And as was noted in here, it could be as soon as 11 to 18 years. So what does that tell me? That tells me there's a sense of urgency, that we do not have the luxury of time to develop a strategic plan and a vision moving forward. Because if you look back in our history, the last 50 years, we were developed with a plan of a retirement community and for seniors to move here. Well, we morphed into something else, even because maybe we didn't want to be that, but we became that because we didn't have the right policies, the right plan in place. So to me, that shows us that it's going to happen whether we want it to happen or not. So why don't we want to make sure that we have policies in place to control our destiny, to become the city that we want to be? And I think, and along the way, make many of your recommendations moving forward so we can make sure that we control our own destiny. And the word that Councilmember Hayden used is validation on some of the topics that you brought up. Some of those topics we've been talking about for years. Unfortunately, we haven't had a plan moving forward to validate any of those items that we've already identified. And that's our fault as a county, as a staff. And I think that's something that we need to change. We've talked about teen centers. We've talked about regional parks. We've talked about our arts and culture in our city. Unfortunately, we haven't acted upon it. And I think that's what we have to make sure that we do moving forward. And that goes back to that statement that I had mentioned earlier, that the one gentleman had mentioned. You know, if we don't do anything, any actions to our plan, it's only a dream. And I'm here to try to make sure that we move forward with actions. Some of the other things that was mentioned, J.C. Park. Our assistant city manager and myself had a conversation over 2 years ago of that same exact topic. Again, some validation. we haven't acted upon it. Housing that was mentioned. It seems like we have single family or multifamily. And like you said, there are housing opportunities in the middle, whether it be townhouses. I know one gentleman on the panel is from Maryland. There's many townhouse communities throughout the region up in that area in the Northeast. So it's definitely something that I think we need to look at. We definitely have to look at workforce housing. Many years ago when you used that word, it was something much different than it is today. Workforce housing today is policemen, firemen, nurses, school teachers. And with the growth that we've experienced in our city in the last 18 months, we are pushing those type of individuals out of our city because they can't afford the housing. That doesn't mean we can't look outside the box and be creative where we can maybe invest in a private public partnerships where we can bring Board housing back to our community. Sports centers, indoor sports facilities, we've had those conversations. A trolley system where that biking, walkability, connectivity throughout our city, I think, is important because, like you said, we have areas throughout our city, whether it's the Tarpon Point area that you stayed in, whether it's Cape Harbor, it's our yacht club, it may be the Seven Islands project or any other future projects. We have to have that connectivity, I think, between all of those for those amenities for our residents and for our visitors. Healthcare facilities. We've had those discussions. I know that some council members up here, myself included, we've talked about a second hospital. To me, it's not a want, it's a need. It's definitely something that we're going to have to address to make sure that we provide that for our community. And I think we have to have that same sense of urgency when you look at our growth numbers. We're going to be there sooner than we think. One of the other things that I thought was quite interesting was the resiliency part as far as having a dedicated staff member, a director or a manager moving forward that has an expertise in that area, that can make those recommendations here to council, because I think that is a very important part in our community moving forward. Also, one of the notes that I had taken, the legislative involvement and mandates on the quality of life regulations moving forward. I also think that's extremely important. We have to make sure that we set that level of expectations, and the only way to do that is with the legislative policies that we put forward and the mandates that we put forward. Our code enforcement department, I know we're in the process of doing a comprehensive review of that, but that all ties in with that statement. The one project that you had mentioned, the Wharf in Washington, D.C., I visited that several times. A great project. I remember when that project was built many years ago, and that is definitely a good example of maybe not that size, but something very similar to that we could have in our city. The recommendations for our parks, again, that's to me some validations of what we should be doing. We've already put that process in place, but we know we're moving forward. You had the yacht club improvements. So it was great to see some of that validation as well moving forward. The boardwalks, the water taxis that are, I think, great possibilities here in our city that we could implement. Indoor recreational facilities that you mentioned. The other thing that really stood out that I think that we definitely, without a doubt, have to engage in and move forward with is that watershed management plan. You know, one of the biggest hurdles that we've faced, I think, in the last year is the rising cost of homeowners and flood insurance. And a lot of that we do not have the control of, that's set by the federal government. So what that tells you is that we have to look outside the box to find out what we need to do to mitigate that rise in cost. So I was very intrigued with the watershed management plan that could provide a 30% reduction in insurance rates. And I think that would be a huge impact on our community if we could implement a program like that. So these are just some of the revenue board I thought was also intriguing. You know, we have many advisory boards here within our city. And when you look at the advisory boards that we have, other than maybe the Budget Review Committee that makes recommendations on a yearly basis, you know, we have the Golf Course Advisory Board that makes recommendations on our golf course. We have a Planning and Zoning Board that makes a recommendation to City Council. We don't have a board to help us define who we want to be, and maybe because all of this costs money. So what we have to try to do is to think, how are we going to pay for it? Every one of these things, I wish we could start tomorrow, but it's going to take revenue in order to do that. So we're going to have to try to determine, once we set our priorities, how are we going to pay for it? So this revenue advisory board, I think, would be an excellent board where we bring in the outside experts from banking, financial institutions, possibly grant writers, those type individuals that maybe could broaden our perspective on what our opportunities may be available out there for us. So with that, I thank you for your presentation. I thank you for the time and the effort that you put in before you got here and the time and effort that you put in after. I'm looking forward to your final draft recommendation. And thank you for me for validating some of the conversations that we've already had, and also making recommendations on areas that maybe we didn't think about. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could respond with just a couple of comments back to you folks before we open it up, if it's your pleasure, to public comment. Number one, on the staffing issue, our general comment, I would say, because we did not have the opportunity, and nor did we feel like it was appropriate to our task to drill down and start looking at organizational charts and staffing positions and things of that at that level of detail. So please take our recommendation. What we see is a wonderful city, and by the way, compliments to your staff here and everyone that we've met, and that comes not just from us, but from the public that we talked with. And there's one reservation, because I'm a reformed developer, so I want to make a side comment that's I'm probably going to have to take my badge off before I do it. Developers always complain that it takes too long to get things approved, okay? You have staff that do that process, and if they could approve my permits and my rezoning this afternoon, I would appreciate it, but it doesn't happen that way. But everything that I heard from even the developer types, and I won't give any names, but your staff is responsive, friendly, supportive. They wish you would move faster, but they're going to say that no matter how fast you move. But everyone that we met on the staff are capable, doing a good job, and we compliment all of them. But what we see coming, the growth that we see coming, it's going to take more. There are going to be demands put on your staff that they have not seen yet, and we're just encouraging you folks. Our suggestion, what we were trying to say was, gear up, the storm's coming. You know, there's a crowd coming, so be prepared for it. On the agency's situation, I fully appreciate Councilman Hayden. I fully appreciate your reservation and reluctance to give someone else perhaps the handle to the purse strings. Interestingly enough, when I talked about heated deliberations, or no, I said heated discussions, I think, didn't I? Whichever. Donnie comes from one side of that public-private partnership methodology. I happen to have spent a number of years working in a very different one. What you choose to do is what you will fit your mold and your custom and practice here in the local community. But when you're talking about raising the money to do the things that you want to do, there are other people that would like to spend their money to do it if you can figure out how to get what you want done and what they want done in the same place and same point in time, sharing the cost. And the more of the cost you get them to share, the better. And then sharing the economic benefits. You know, those things can be done. There are a lot of models for it, but engaging the banking sector, engaging the pastoral sector, as Donnie mentioned, getting everybody around one table, and I would even encourage somehow or another trying to figure out how to do that group for an hour at lunch once a month on a regular basis. However you set up those boards or organizations, clubs, call them what you want to, but if you can get that dialogue happening on a regular basis, I think you'll be amazed at what happens if you're not already doing it. You may already be doing it. Okay, with that,
All right, thank you,
I'll
sir.
defer to you, sir.
Councilmember Cozzin, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also want to thank you, Uli. I had fun with my interview chatting with Susanna. There's so much good information here. I'm really excited about a lot of the things. I like the idea of having a special meetings to talk about this. There's so much to unpack here. And I do like the idea of a special board that would be responsible for like the vision. I think, like the mayor said, a lot of these things are going to cost money, lots of money, but there are some things here that are not too expensive or even free, changing regulations and things like that. So I would like to, as soon as we have the final report, start tackling the low-hanging fruit and then look at the bigger picture. But again, thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
Oh, first of all, I would like to thank you all for your input and all the work that you put into our city. I'm very grateful for it. I don't want to, a lot of things I wanted to say, the mayor already said, so I don't want to repeat. So I'll say a couple other things that weren't already brought up. Is I think we have to embrace a lot of our nonprofits in the city and use them as a tool to get a lot of the things we want accomplished. And I'll give an example. We had a new nonprofit developed to do our medians. We had problems coming up with the money to do median beautification, and now we have achieved that through a nonprofit. So I believe a lot of these other ideas that you brought forward, some of them that we've already thought of, but that you encouraged as well. I think we need to build a better relationship with our nonprofits throughout the city and look to them for help to achieve some of these goals. The other thing I really liked hearing was that, you know, these niches and these beautiful places that you've talked about creating around the city for people to go to and enjoy. I know myself, I've always looked at the coastline around the city to do these things, but you opened my eyes to that we can create special places throughout the city. When you showed us the graph with the circles, we have to spread this around. We have to create these special places everywhere in the city. I like that idea. It makes every little neighborhood and area unique and special, and let them have their own little special identity for where they are in the city. I really like that idea. So once again, thank you for your input, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Councilmember Long.
Thank you. Yeah, like all the others, I wanted to thank you first for your work this week and your continued work. Even the condensed product here is incredibly insightful. Obviously, like the others, I'm going to reserve most of my comments and discussion for the final report, which I look forward to. But a couple, as far as a sweeping overview, some of the key principles that I was encouraged by, and Councilmember Cozzin kind of jumped to this, as far as low-hanging fruit in the context of some of these larger principles, was the identifiable districts, the community building in those neighborhoods. I think that's, like she said, low-hanging fruit something that is a relatively simple fix in the context of some of these larger scale projects that's going to bring some immediate reward for the citizens. So that was cool to see. Public waterfront access, obviously very important as we kind of continue to project ourselves as a predominantly waterfront community. Indoor recreation is something personal to me. I've brought it up a couple different times, so that was exciting to see. Something that we could even incorporate more than one point into, maybe slip the teen center into some portion of that project in one way or another. Resiliency, obviously a huge issue that we're going to continue to tackle as the city grows out and climate becomes more and more of an issue. So that's something that we'll have to work on. But back to the mayor's point and some of the others, the question that we're left with after all of this, and we'll continue to be left with, is what we're going to do with the information. So it's important to his point that we identify a roadmap, and how we break down the report. We identify the actionable items, and then we actually take that action. And so something like special meetings to break those down, similar to what some of us have done through our membership with the CTAC with regards to the transportation master plan, kind of break it down into fragments based on some of those key points and have those special meetings on each one of those particular items. But yeah, a lot to unpack. I look forward to the final report, and thanks again.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. I first want to say thank you to the city manager because I feel like he really brought it to us and allowed us to go through it. And it has been eye-opening. And I think, as you said, Mayor, and some of the others, it did bring a lot of validation of things we kind of already knew. I think we have a great opportunity. I've always felt that we have such a great opportunity in this city to make it even better, even stronger. We just heard the other night from council, another Oasis sports field, and that just fits right into what was said earlier and what we feel our city really needs more of. I mean, we just had the new executive director of the Cultural Arts Theater come before us a few weeks back, to introduce himself. And I just think as those types of items come forward to us, especially with the budget, that we need to be paying attention and definitely mapping out our priorities, because it is a very large many-tiered cake that we have to go through. So I just wanted to say thank you. I too really enjoyed my interview with Donnie. I felt like you asked me really hard questions, but I think workforce development and economic development go hand in hand, and that's going to help bring diversity of all kinds, generational, cultural, educational diversity. It's just going to be a really great thing. So I agree. I'm looking forward to putting together a task force or a group to help us prioritize these things in the next few years. I think connectivity, I chuckled a little bit when you all talked about the connectivity of our city, and remember the first time I drove here in 2008, and everywhere I turned, if I didn't get the terrace, the avenue, or the street, I was hitting water. So I'm really grateful that was brought up. And then, of course, also the continuity in terms of some of the cultural projects that we've done, like painting the utility boxes, and how we really need to take that a step further and have it be more collective. So I appreciate this, and I look forward to our future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Just one last question while I was sitting here listening to everyone. Does the Urban Land Institute, I know you come and do an initial evaluation and make recommendations. Do you do any type of a follow-up analysis, say when you look maybe 2 years or 3 years down the road? You'll take a look at what your recommendation, kind of see what we've done and how we're moving forward.
Interesting that you should ask that question, given that I now realize that I've been doing this for how many years, Mary Beth? 24 years. There has always been amongst some of us an informal follow-up evaluation. I've gone back to almost every city where I've done these things and followed up with the people like yourselves to say, how's it going, what's happening? ULI more recently has begun to adopt a formalized evaluation to do that same thing. I don't believe, and Mary Beth will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we have a formal structure in place. But I think that's in the process of coming about, because a lot of us are interested in saying, okay, you know, for our own benefit, because this is such an important piece of the ULI, you know, existence. We want to be sure that we're doing a good job as best we can. We want to, and in order to know that, you got to go back and look at the results. You know, did our recommendations, were they worth giving? Did people appreciate them? Did they follow up on them? And if so, what worked, what didn't work, what might have worked better had we done it a little different way? So if you're asking us if the ULI as an institution would be interested in following up with you, I'm going to stick my neck out and get in trouble and say yes, and then Mary Beth will clarify what I just said. Go ahead.
Well, that's a great question, and a couple of things. As Lee mentioned, we do have a more formal process where we actually go back and we're trying to measure impact, and David heads that effort up. So we will be in continued communication with the city as to what's happened with the recommendations. A couple of thoughts I have, and I'm happy to talk to whoever offline about this, is we do have a very active district council in Southwest Florida, members of ULI who are engaged locally. We will reach out to them. They were not able to be here today, our executive director, but I will reach out to her and talk about those possibilities of working with you all, and then always happy to continue the conversation. We realize that it takes a long time, that things aren't going to change in the next 6 months, and we are really making a concerted effort to make sure that we keep engaged and that we are able to follow the impact of what happens.
And I will add one other thing too, and I'm going to throw all of my fellow panelists under the bus, because I didn't ask them about their willingness to do this, but I'm going to make them. I'm going to say they're willing. As you all know, we're here as volunteers, and we actually sign a conflict of interest waiver when we do this, and say none of us will come back and have a stake in anything that's going on in Cape Coral for a period of time. And I think it's a year. Is that correct? Is that what the document says, or 2 years or something? Anyway, so in other words, we're not doing this to try to drum up business. But quite frankly, if anybody from Cape Coral wants to give me a call and say, hey, what about this? You know, you were talking about so-and-so, where did that idea come from? I'm open to that at any point in time, and I suspect that any of the other panel members would be, you know, completely responsive to any questions that might come from anyone. So we're open.
I know it could probably be pretty comprehensive, some of the policies and regulations that we're going to have to put in place to make some of these changes happen. Do you have a recommendation on a time frame for a follow-up 5 years from now, 3 years from now, as far as what would your recommendation?
If you ask me how best to go forward, I would suggest, you know, maybe a 6-month and a 1 year and a 2 year and a 5 year time frame, because in the beginning you've got a whole bunch of material in front of you that are ideas, and they're aspirational ideas, like these agencies that, and Donnie used the term agency. I tend to use the word or the phrase, you know, public-private nonprofit 501c3 that's got some governance and broad-based support and leadership. So that's where he and I would argue for hours, I'm sure. But whoever's got the money and the political power ends up making the decision about what it really looks like, okay? That's you guys, okay? And your banker friends, because they're the ones that got the money. But going through that process, there are examples of everything, virtually everything we've talked about. There are examples that you can look at in other places and say, well, that part looks good, that part doesn't look good, and you can merge that stuff together. So, you know, my encouragement would be, if in your process, because y'all are subject to the Sunshine Law and all those kinds of things, so whatever works appropriately here, but set a 6-month time frame, a 1 year time frame, and then 2 years, and maybe double the frequency, but set a schedule and say, here's what we're going to try to do. But don't let that schedule drag out too far, because people will forget what they did at the last meeting, and as we have said several times, the train's coming. You know, the people are coming, so it'll be upon you before you know it.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think that's something, and we'll have, I'm sure, future discussions at a regular council meeting, how we want to move forward. But for me, I think a meeting once a month to have this discussion is something that we have to implement. Because there's a lot to do here and a lot to consider. So, and the only way to get that accomplished is to have those meetings. So thank you for that insight. I think at this time, since I don't have any other council members that are wanting to follow up, I will open up the public input aspect of the meeting. We'll utilize the podium to the left. So anyone who would like to come forward, please do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Betty, if you want to put up that chart I provided. Again, Tom Shadrack, permanent citizen, and I have a couple comments. I was at the workshop when ULI, Mr. Tom Etler, presented the idea of doing this with the support of the city manager, and I was skeptical. I've been with the Boeing company for 37 years, and every 3 years we get a new vice president. And 2 months later, a consultant group would come in and tell us how to do things better. And after 2 years, generally there were some novel ideas, but most of the employees knew how to do the job. And the vice president would leave in 2 years, and then we'd be back to normal. So that's the skepticism in 37 years of consulting groups. And I know the city manager made a decision. This group is different, and it's a volunteer group, a matter of experts. And I said, and I embraced it. Once the council decided we're going to do this, I thought about it and took to heart Tom's point about if we're going to be as productive in a week as we can be, get down to 2 or 3 top items that we can focus on and get the experts here that know that. And so once the contract was signed, I asked for them to work to see if it was 2 or 3 items. And I was disappointed when I saw that you had 12 tasks to do. And I go, wow, that's not what was asked. And so I took the time to kind of write a 1-page deal. If you want to push that down a little bit, Betty, and I think she gave you a handout. This was my write-up, just to say the top 4 items on the all the way down. The scope are the same as the 12, just condensed. What are the most important things I thought out of the 12, and that's the top 4. I added the 5th one, which is near and dear to a lot of the West citizens. That's unique about the Chiquita Lock and the Seven Island area, and I can talk that in a minute. But I thought these were the top things that I was concerned with after living here and choosing this as my home. And just to reiterate again, I am pretty analytical. I searched the whole Southwest area of places to live, and I chose Cape Coral. I love it, I like it, and I want it to be better, and I live here for a reason. And so these were the top 4 things, and some of the things I was listening now to your presentation, I really didn't hear about the fact that we don't have easy access to Highway 75 or the airport. And I didn't hear that as a discussion, and that was one of the key points there. And the other thing I didn't get to hear, which I think is important, on how we play with our sister cities between Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Pine Island. How do we work together? Because they certainly have a lot of amenities that we'll never have. And how do we enhance that? And so that was like number 2 there, and I didn't really see that. And another thing, the best thing I've ever had from consultants was what not to do from the city. What shouldn't we be doing? What shouldn't we aspire to do? Like I heard people that might have talked to you, let's try to keep everybody in Cape Coral from having to cross the bridge. Let's have great things. I don't think that's the right thing. We've got great, we got 2 major league ballparks, spring training across the bridge. We got theaters right across the bridge. Why aren't we taking advantage of that in our planning and thinking? A couple great things I did here.
How to wrap it up, Mr. Shadrack.
Okay, I thought you mentioned this was going to be a hearing instead of a 3-minute, but I'll try. Now I was moving into now what I've heard, and I'll try to get through them real quick. Things I liked were maybe the no water beaches were a good idea because we can't get to the water easily. I actually thought the water taxis was an interesting concept, but let's have parking areas where people can be taken to Sanibel, Captiva, Fort Myers Beach, and back all the time, because those are great beaches, and we'll never compete with the ocean, okay? And big parks was a great idea. I love our Red, White, and Boom, the bonfire, the arts festival, all the patriotic parades we have, all great things that bring the city together. But we concentrated on neighborhood parks first with our Go Bon instead of the major parks, and we're not even off the drawing board for those after 4 years. So that's an interesting issue.
Mr. Shadrack, your time's up. If you'd like to submit a written response to City Council on any of your recommendations, I'm sure we would all love to hear whatever your recommendations are.
Okay, I will probably wait for the report.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak during public input, please come forward. Seeing none, public input is now closed. So I'll turn it over to Mr. City Manager.
Well, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the entire staff here at the City of Cape Coral, I want to express our gratitude to all the members of the panelists and for taking their time to come to this great city for a week. I hope you enjoyed your time, and we certainly enjoyed the time that we got to spend with you. I also want to express our sincere gratitude to all of the individuals that participated throughout the whole process. I want to thank Nita Whaley for really stepping in well after the train left the station and helping us coordinate all of this and making today possible. So, Mr. Mayor, I look forward to continuing conversations with members of City Council, with staff and the community as we continue to plot our future. You know, what at the appropriate time will incorporate the recommendations made by ULI once they are accepted by you into our Cape Compass, which is our strategic guidebook moving forward. And, you know, we have a new tagline that we've adopted, and I think that you've heard loud and clear from the panelists today that we are a great city and that we are a city flowing with possibilities. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to, again, thank all of the panelists that came and took time out of your busy schedules to make recommendations to us. I think we all have a desire to be a great city, so your input is invaluable. I appreciate that. We will definitely look forward to your final report, and also I would look forward to a follow-up visit so you can grade us to see how we're doing. And I always believe when you look outside, when someone from the outside is looking in, they can give a better perspective of what we should be doing, because you don't have a vested interest. So I think that's extremely important. So thank you for that. I want to thank staff for everything that they have done throughout the week and even prior to get ready and provide the information to our panelists. And I know, I believe that our City Council is willing and ready to roll up our sleeves to make some of this a reality. And I look forward to working with staff in the future because it's going to take a lot of different facets, whether it's land development, it's code regulation, economic development policies. We're going to have to put all of that into the same bucket to make this to make this happen. So I look forward, and I look forward to the challenge, and I look forward to making our city much better tomorrow than it is today. So thank you. Any other comments from any council members? Okay. Time and place of future meetings. We have a special meeting today, an attorney-client session. The Cape Coral City Council is scheduled for today, Wednesday, May 20th at 1 p.m. here in Council Chambers. We have a committee of the whole meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 9 a.m. in council chambers. And we also have a regular meeting, Cape Coral City Council, scheduled Wednesday, June 1st at 4:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Is there a motion for adjournment? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.